Hello Peconians, welcome back to the Pecos musical journey. Today I'm going to talk to you about how I built my XLR cables and is it worth it? No. Before we get going, please remember to subscribe to this channel with the subscribe button below. If you don't subscribe, I'm gonna cry. Also, if you think of anything to say throughout the video, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section below and I'll get right back at you. Okay, so about building your own cables. Many of you probably are thinking about building the cables for the first time, or many of you already have experience and want to see for another option. This video is not really a tutorial. You are going to see a little bit of how I did it, but I have no close-ups of how to solder and that kind of stuff. But I'm gonna give you 7 steps that you should think about and follow when you build your cables. And the last thing is going to be a budget comparison between how many cables I got, the quality of these cables, compared to getting the same quality cables from a manufacturer online and the same amount of footage. Now, here are the 7 steps. First, plan your cables and budget, then get the cables and parts, then watch a video on how to make them. Buy the necessary tools, cut all the cables, assemble the cables, test and label the cables. Okay, so let's not wait any longer and move on to the first step. So, step number 1. Plan your cables. When you plan your cables, you really want to make sure you're not gonna budget for more than you need or you're not gonna cut short. It's very important that you are as precise as possible and you imagine yourself in all of the possible scenarios that you're gonna be using your cables for. Okay, now you want to make sure first that you know all of the I/O setting that you have in all of your gear. The more gear you start buying, the more complex your studio starts becoming. To calculate how many cables and which size of cables you're gonna need, what I recommend is that you use a pre-existing cable that you have, the longest you can possibly find, and you label the length of your cable just like I did in this one, right? So this one is 18 feet and I know that when I measure this, maybe I need a little less or a little more, and then I can calculate things. Now, how do I measure any cable? I'll start doing is by doing a mark on my desk. So anytime I go from the side of the desk to the mark, it's gonna be of course 1 foot. So that way I'm gonna start measuring my cables and know exactly how much cable I need. After doing all of my measures, I'm gonna explain them to you briefly so you can understand my thought process and you can maybe do the same. I have here my 1073 and my Apollo X8P. The 1073 has a total of 4 inputs, and those are inputs in the back, which can also function as inputs in the front. For the XLR cables, I'm using only the inputs in the front, because for the back I'm gonna use TRS from a snake. On the X8P, I have 8 inputs. 4 of those are going to be XLR, and these are going to be the 4 outputs from the knees that are going to go from TRS into the inputs of the X8P. The reason for that is that I'm going to use, of course, my 1073s to record my main tracks for everything. So I'm going to use it for guitars, I'm going to use it for vocals, I'm going to use it for my overheads, my snare and my kick. And then when I record drums, I'll do 4 channels here, the 4 1073s, and in the X8P I'll do the other 4 channels, which will be snare bottom, tom 1, tom 2 and tom 3. For this I'm gonna need a total of 8 XLR cables to use as microphone inputs, and then I'm gonna need 4 TRS cables of 8 feet each to go into the X8P. So after doing all of my calculations, I didn't count these ones because they are sort of like repeated. I'm just gonna count the longest cables I need. So I ended up having 2 20 feet, 1 16 feet and 5 15 feet cables, plus the 4 8 feet TRS cables. The total of these is going to be 163 feet of cable. Now, the first time I did this, I got I think like 170 something, and I had to actually cut it down a little bit because the cable I got was a stock measure, which is 164, and I want to have at least 2 feet headroom to try out how the cable cutting works with my tools. Okay, so step number 2, get your cable. Now that you know how much cable you need, you're gonna probably shop for different cables. I recommend looking for cables on Sweetwater. They have a bunch of cables, and they actually have like a tool that's called Cable Finder, where you can select the in and the out and all the specifics, the length and stuff, and they're gonna give you a bunch of them. But if you write down microphone cable bulk, all of these results are gonna come up. So what you want for better quality is the quad bulk cable, because the quad cables are going to have 2 hot and 2 cold cables inside for better noise reduction, and it's going to give you a better signal overall. It's like the highest quality thing. So you gotta look for the cable that you think is best for you. I personally like Mogami, right? And they have the quad, which is the one I got, and this is $200. Mogami is pretty much the standard of cables for very good quality. Alright, so step number 3. This step is literally just watch a video on how to solder a cable. I am gonna recommend the video right here, right now, and it's a very good video that talks about how to solder with the Mogami quad cable, which is the cable I got. If you get any other cable, maybe look for a video that matches the cable you got. Okay, so we're almost about to do the cables, but not yet. Before, we gotta run through the checklist of all of the tools that we have in our tool set and also our materials. We gotta make sure, of course, that we have the cable, the necessary connectors, and I'm going to show you the tools that I have. If you watched the previous video, you probably already have an idea of the tools that you might need. So, safety always goes first. It could happen that some solder sort of like splashes out. Maybe the cable moves or something happens. You want to protect your eyes because the solder is going to be very, very hot. So just make sure that you have some cool looking protective glasses. Then there's this sort of like third hand tool, which is helpful for grabbing the cable if you need to have like an extra hand. Then we have these wire strippers. These are very cool because what they do is they basically strip the jacket of the wire. This is another wire stripper in case you can't reach the wire with your other one. It's for more precise cutting. And this is wire cutter. We have our solder. This is rosin core solder 63 and 37, and of course we have our soldering iron. Now that we have everything on the checklist, let's start cutting the wire. So this is gonna be step number 5. We want to cut all of the wire to the lengths that we already calculated. To me, it works better to just do all of the cuts at once. I'm gonna measure all of the cables. I'm gonna try to be as precise as possible. So let's do all of the measuring. Okay, so we've made it this far. It's step number 6 right now. And step number 6 is gonna be assembly. One step that was mentioned in the video I recommended is that you should put the boots of the cables on first. Now, please remember, don't miss this step. If you don't put them now, once you solder the cables, you're not going to be able to put them unless you unsolder. And that is something you don't want to happen. Mostly if you bought your supplies at the exact quantity. It's already nighttime. I already have my 8 XLR cables done, and I'm working on some TRS cables, which I can't get too freaking close. Look at this, right there. It doesn't just go all the way. It's driving me crazy. So it's been a couple of days since I started this video. It's been taking longer than I thought to solder the cables, but I finally have all of my cabling done. Those are my TRS and these are my XLR. Yes, they are all looking super good. So we're all the way through step number 7, which will be testing your cables and labeling them. For this step, you'll need a cable tester and a labeling machine. About the cable tester, cable tester, I'll leave a link right here or like wherever it appears. It's a pretty cool video. I laughed a lot at some point, but it's very good, and it explains how it works. I'll just do a couple of tests for the sake of the video. It's a pretty affordable unit, the Behringer CT100. Then I have this label maker, which I bought for like 20 bucks at Staples. It's pretty cool, and I'll explain why I use that label maker and not another method. Okay, so we're going to start testing the cable. The way this unit works is you turn it on, you put the input and the output, and then you do reset, and it's going to tell you what is connected to what. I'm not gonna go more in depth with this, but this means the cable is okay. I'm just gonna repeat this process with all of my cables. Okay, so you're probably wondering, why am I testing my cables with that cable tester, and am I not just pulling the cable into the interface and see if the microphone works? Well, if you have a short in your cable and you plug it into your favorite condenser, you might damage the microphone. You really don't want to risk anything here. I once broke a microphone by unplugging it while the phantom power was on, and then it never worked again. So you don't want to risk it. You don't want to plug a bad cable into your mic and maybe ruin some of the circuitry. Okay, now, so why label with a label maker? And the reason is, the first time I did my cables years ago, I grabbed masking tape and marked the masking tape with a Sharpie, which works really bad. The masking tape wears off immediately, and then it starts to get sticky on the cable and gets dirty. It's really bad. This, on the other hand, creates like a sort of like plastic covered label, which is way better for this purpose, and it's smaller, and when you take it off, it doesn't leave a mark. You can label them however you want, by instrument, by input, or in my case, I'll do by length, because I'll be using them for different applications through and through. Okay, so we are getting to the end of the video, and now I'm going to answer the question, is it worth it? But before I answer, I want to do some calculations with you. Okay, so here is the budget that I made for you. These are all of the expenses that I did based only on the amount of cable that I used. Right here, I've got the wire, which is the Mogami W2534 necklace quad bulk microphone wire, which was a total of $218.99 after tax. Here are the connectors, XLR, TRS, and the solder. Why did I include the solder here? It's because the solder is something that you're probably gonna have to buy again. The total expenses for only the parts without the tools is $367.46. Then the tools, which I consider to be like a one-time expense, because they're like investments that you do and then you're not gonna need to buy them again, most probably, right? So if you have these or any of these, this cost is going to be lower for you, right? So the soldering iron is 42 bucks, 43, and after tax 47. The soldering mat and so on. So you can see each of the items here. I'm not gonna go over each of them, but these are all the things that I bought, and I actually used all of these when I made the cables. The total of only the tools is $197.09, and the total of everything is $564.55. Now, at first I saw that and I said, like, there's no way that I'm gonna profit from this. Like, it's probably not really convenient at all. But then when I saw the actual price per foot that I had, and like when I compared to the Sweetwater cables, so I did 163 feet of cable with no tools, 367 with tools, so the total's 564 and 55, which means it's 2.25 a foot with no tools, or 3.46 a foot with tools. Now, the Mogami cable, when you buy them, the 25-foot one, it's like $100 a piece, right? So I did a calculation of how much is each foot, and it's $4.16. I was like, oh, it's not gonna be so much, like so different. When I multiplied it, I got $677.89 for all of the cabling. Now, I already bought all of my tools and that. So if I want to make more cables, now my price per foot is going to be $2.25, which is going to be almost half of getting the cable from a retail store. That's a huge saving you're doing. Now, I saved a little more than $100 even buying all the tools. So yeah, this is pretty good. So as you could see with the math, it's absolutely worth it. At least for me, it makes a ton of sense. Keep in mind that I calculated the Mogami price of the cables with the 25-foot Mogami Gold XLR cable, which is probably the one that gives you the best value for the cable. So if I would have calculated for the lengths that I got, which are two 20-foot cables, 5 15-foot and 1 16-foot cable, plus all of the TRS cables, which are 8 feet each, I'm probably getting like a way better value. So the question of whether building your own cables is worth it or not goes more into the space of course, the math, but also your time, your skills, and you're willing to do this job. But overall, if you think about it, first, you save money. It does take a lot of time. I built 12 cables, and it took me a good 8 hours or so. It was very time consuming. Now, I learned a new skill. I started from really not doing like a great job to actually knowing what I was doing. And that's a good thing. Why? If you break a cable or you have signs of any cable not working properly, you know how to test it and you probably know how to fix it, because most probably you only have to buy a new connector, or you have to resolder a part, or you have to just buy more cable and use the connectors. But that's going to, in the future, save you so much money as well, because you're building the cables to your own needs and the exact amount of cable that you need. And that's very, very good. So yes, my answer to this question is it is absolutely worth it. Give it a try. Okay, so that's how I build my XLR cables. If you agree with it being worth it or you don't, please leave a comment below and explain why. Thank you so much for staying with me. See you next time.